As the communist barrier between East and West Berlin grows higher and stronger, the more determined grows the will of those in the East to escape. Camera crews are harassed by reflecting mirrors in the hands of East German police, and water hoses are played on equipment. Nevertheless, our reporters are able to come up with some remarkable pictures.
Between 1870 and 1924, the Russian revolutionary Vladimir Lenin adapted to Karl Marx's communist ideals, saying that a society could progress direction from feudalism to communism, bypassing the capitalist stage. In 1917, Lenin organized the communist revolution in the Russian Empire, which had been severely crippled by World War I, lasting 5 years. By 1922, after much bitter fighting, the Russian Empire had been replaced by the communist regime, the Soviet Union or the USSR. Being a voluntary union of communist republics, the USSR used violence to keep their power. Many rights such as freedom of speech and the right to travel were ignored, and those who disagreed with the communist way were imprisoned and often killed. Leaders of the Soviet Union had two priorities. First, to construct the new model of a modern industrial state that was anti-capitalist, and second, to defend themselves from an external enemy throughout the Cold War. The Soviet Union took over all of the major economic resources in the country in the name of the people. Previous owners had lost their property in revolution and their positions in society. The communists replaced these former owners with state employees in which they managed the firms and the farms. Although firms and individuals still traded, bought and sold goods from one another and to one another, people still acquired goods and kept them for themselves as a form of private property. However, the whole system was known as a transformation met with resistance from the wealthy and from the lower class peasants. All serious domestic political opposition activity was criminalized, and those who violated these decrees were killed at times, especially during Stalin's rule in 1878 through 1953, jailed at others, or socially and economically ostracized. The United States pushed for the expansion for the arms race, launched military exercises that led the Soviet Union to believe that they were under attack, and spoke ominously about the winnability about nuclear war. Every incident threatened the possibility of war. Tension grew further over the course of 1983.
I became a communist when I was 18 years old. I became a party member and I went through a great deal in my political career, and my conclusion was to fight Stalinism.
As a citizen of Moscow, Russia, Mikhail Gorbachev experienced the tensions and difficulties that all of the other citizens had felt under Joseph Stalin's regime. During World War II, Gorbachev lost half a dozen relatives at the front. When war ended, much of Russia had been left in ruins. This strict hierarchical system, which the Soviet Union imposed on the whole country, caused faith in the political leadership to dwindle, and the nation as a whole was desperate for change. On August 13, 1961, the German Democratic Republic completely cut off West Berlin, surrounding East Germany and from East Berlin. Walter Ulbricht built a massive concrete wall across Berlin, sealing the east and west border. This Berlin Wall came to symbolize the Iron Curtain and communist tyranny throughout the Cold War. With 79 miles of fencing, 20 bunkers, 250 watchdogs, 65 anti-vehicle trenches, and nearly 300 watchtowers, overnight families were separated, and thousands of East Berliners lost jobs in the West.
Нельзя построить новое общество, не опираясь на сам народ, не вовлекая его.
Elected in 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev took over political leadership of the Soviet Union. He not only ratcheted down tensions, but did more than any other single individual in Soviet history to bring the Berlin Wall down. Challenged with the political system, economy, and society, he commenced an effort to democratize politics, to rebuild the economy by introducing market mechanisms, and to enliven society by granting citizens more freedom to organize, speak, and write. As the eighth and final leader of the republics of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev put together a set of difficult reforms including glasnost, perestroika, and democratization that were unlike anything seen in Soviet history.
We needed the courage for change, even though we understood that change is risky, change is even dangerous. But in our society, everywhere in the Soviet Union, this demand was everywhere. That is to say, we need change. We can no longer live as before.
Mikhail Gorbachev issued his first Soviet reform of glasnost in the late 1980s, granting greater social freedoms for those in the USSR. His policy of openness allowed people to talk about what was going on in their towns, cities, and workplaces, because he realized that he could not trust the reports of his own Communist Party officials. He hoped to expose social ills and these social malefactors to the public's gaze as a way of finding out the extent of the problem. However, in order to do this, he had to open up everything in the society, all at once. The result of glasnost was not only that he got these reports of corruption, but also that people began talking about other things like what Stalin had done or what had happened in 1917. The Gorbachev rules were marked by explosive new revelations of corruption, historical crimes, and differing political visions from past presidents of the USSR. Perestroika and democratization were his attempts to deal with a very sluggish Soviet economy. He faced many problems in doing so. It was not just that the model of extensive planning through a huge democracy was unwieldy and inefficient. It also put the tasks of reporting outcomes and of being responsible for those outcomes in the same hand. These were the ones that Brezhnev had protected. As a result, they lied regularly about economic output. Gorbachev needed to change the thinking of these men so that the economy would prosper. These all had limited, positive effects, but clearly were not capable of fundamentally changing the dynamics of the Soviet economy. Gorbachev sought to get rid of the system that they had that was affecting the economy, energize youthful ideologists, and chart a new and improved vision for the Soviet economy and society. Eventually, this desire would lead him to embrace market mechanisms in the economy and the allowance of ever greater sectors of private enterprise in the country.
Началась борьба за то, чтобы одни хотели перехватить власть в свои руки, это противники перестройки.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
November 9th, 1989 marked the date that changed history, the fall of the Berlin Wall. The Communist German Democratic Republic ceased to exist as Germany was reunited into a single democratic capitalist state.
Why did I do it? Because I felt that there was a real possibility that the Communist Party elite might one day oust me and strip me of any power, and that would be the end of any reform in the country.
Although some in Russia see Mikhail Gorbachev's legacy as part of the destroyer of a great power, Gorbachev retains much of his popularity in the West, seeing him as a hero who non-violently parted the Iron Curtain and put an end to the evil Soviet Empire. However, all of his reforms in a variety of ways ended up being failed ones. Glasnost and democratization ended up undermining his own political base and his own ability to get anything done, and his perestroika reform started out well, but collapsed into a political system of anarchy. Gorbachev undermined the Soviet system without allowing and creating another system to replace it, which led to disorganization throughout the economy and an economic crisis.
I hereby discontinue my activities at the post of President of the USSR.
As Mikhail Gorbachev's reforms faltered under his own leadership, the people began to look for an even more progressive leader, Boris Yeltsin. With Yeltsin, they could go faster and Russian nationalism grew. As the eighth and final leader of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev's bold reforms and distinctive leadership transformed world order. His undeniable legacy is defined not only by lifting the veil of the Iron Curtain through policies like glasnost, perestroika, and democratization, but also by taking a stand to reform the Soviet Union, resulting in the fall of the Berlin Wall, communism, and the reunification of Germany until this day. His attempt to work with the people, his attempt to deal with economic questions, and also his attempt to get regular people involved in the reform movement proved that Gorbachev was clearly a new figure in the Soviet Union. And as Mikhail Gorbachev states, if not me, who? And if not now, when?